Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce this event. For those of you who are new to Ashby Village, we're an organization that supports people living at home as they age. We are a very vibrant community with over 400 members, 300 active volunteers who live in Oakland, Richmond, and all the cities in between. The mission of the Exploring Creativity Group is to present workshops and programs featuring Ashby Village members who share their creative work. We hope this will inspire and motivate you to explore your own creative urges. We're happy to bring this program to a wider audience free of charge, but please consider supporting programs like this. The link to make a donation is in the chat, or you can just go to our website, www.ashbyvillage.org, and click the Donate Now link. Now, I'd like to introduce Arlene Reef. Arlene is an Ashby Village member and a volunteer. She's been involved in program development for Ashby Village for the past 3 years. She's the coordinator for the Exploring Creativity Group and a member of the events planning team. Welcome, Arlene.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. I want to add my voice. It's just so special to know that all of you are here to join us in this very wonderful program you're about to see with Judith Masur in conversation with her brother, Richard Masur. I had the wonderful opportunity to get to know Judith and meet her brother in the planning of the program, and I'm very grateful for that. And now I'd like to tell you a few words about Judith's background. She describes herself, and rightly so, as a Renaissance woman and a Jill of all trades, and you're going to see why in a little while for sure. Judith, who's now 76, has been creating art and playing with words, are you ready for this, since she was 5 years old. She was born in New York, as I was. I have to put that in. She worked as a body worker, a life coach, a computer programmer, a teacher, where she taught everything from elementary school to junior college, courses in special ed, English, ESL. Indeed, a Renaissance woman. And throughout her life, there's been this important thread of her art and her journey and the many expressions that it's taken, and you're going to see that today. And now I'd like to say a few words about her brother, Richard Masur, who lives in New York and is joining us from there. Richard is an actor who's been in what he calls, not me, a ridiculous number of films, TV, and on and off Broadway for over the past 50 years. How about that, 50 years? And starting in 1989, he's been a leader, very active and influential, serving on many committees and the board of directors for 2 of his unions, the Screen Actors Guild and SAG-AFTRA, and he was also national president of SAG from 1995 to 1999. But most importantly, he told me he's been Judith's brother for 73 and a half years. So without further ado, here's Judith and Richard.
I have to unmute.
There.
There we go.
All righty.
All right.
So here we are. We're going to have a conversation. Judith, you want to get started and say hi to everybody first?
I want to welcome everybody for coming and taking time out of this beautiful day to spend time with us. And I especially want to thank Arlene, who you just saw. She's been my wrangler throughout this, and she's been a tremendous help and support to me, and value her tremendously for that. I want to thank Charis Hanshaw for the blanket job she's done in promoting this event, and Jessica Sterling for running the show. And of course, I want to thank my little brother, Richard, for being so very kind and helpful and supportive. Okay, well, just to begin, I want to, I was asked to talk about my art history, sort of how I became an artist and how I went from thing to thing and process to process and medium to medium along the way, and also to talk somewhat about and share a little bit about my writing, which has been an important thread for me and more or less where I began, I'd say, began with words. I want to acknowledge the fact that it's very hard to tell such a story, especially a complicated one, in an hour. So I had to leave out a lot. I had to leave out a lot of pictures, and I had to leave out lots of details of the story. But we're going to go forward and see if we can give you some things to listen to and things to enjoy visually.
This will be the Cliff Notes version for those of you old enough to remember Cliff Notes. Okay, Jude. So why don't, if you would, how did you get started? Because I know you want to address words first. What brought you into writing? And I know, look, I know you read voraciously for as long as I've been alive, because you were reading when I showed up, pretty much, and you were always always with a book, while I was always watching television. Hence the divergence in our lives. But go ahead, why don't you talk about that?
Well, and of course, everything I say, this person knows, but I was given words as a birthright by my mother, and through my grandfather to my mother. My mother loved words. She played with words. She encouraged me to play with words, and I enjoyed them. I enjoy languages, and I enjoy words in and of themselves, their sounds and their meanings. For me, the dictionary was my favorite book. When there were dictionaries, there are those old enough to remember dictionaries. So
Every time, by the way, every time we would ask my father a question about what is this or what is that or what is that, what did he always say?
look it up.
Look it up. That's right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Or to me, the dictionary was a treasure chest and a treasure hunt. It went from one word to the other. How I got to play with, when I was young, my mother, who had gone to, and my parents both went to city schools. The father went to City and my mother went to Hunter in New York. And in Hunter, they had this thing called Sing, which was a competition between the classes, among the classes, and they would write oratorios, basically, sung stories, and all the words were parodies to other songs. And so that's where I got the bug. I got the bug, and when I began writing parodies. I will tell you that the first poem that I have of mine, where is it? The first poem that I have of mine that I kept, believe it or not, and I really recommend saving things because it's fun to see them afterwards. I wrote very young, probably I was about 8. So I'm just going to give you a taste of some poetry here before we go into the art. And here's the poem. It has all the elements that I still have in my writing, but here it is. I love the snow, the dazzling snow, as it comes fluttering down so light. So quietly it comes to me, so softly in the dark of night. What I like about it in retrospect, and the through line that I am still have with it, is that it's rooted in the visual, it's rooted in the senses, and that's very important to me in my writing as well. And I like that it twists around and it brings two things together which don't seem to match, but when they come together, they kind of pop each other. All right, I'll talk about parody. I'll say that my brother mentioned reading. Reading was a big teacher for me, of course, and there was children's books too that taught me. I learned about words from my mother and from Dr. Seuss and from, most particularly, from W.S. Gilbert of Gilbert and Sullivan. And I'm going to sing you a little bit of the song, which is to give you an example of a parody. It's based on the very famous Gilbert and Sullivan song from the Pirates of Penzance, which is, I am the very model of a modern major general. I have information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England, and I quote the fights historical from Marathon to Waterloo and order categorical. That's how it goes, in case you're not familiar with it. So at a certain point, I wrote this song, and I want to say that I should back up a minute. I'm going to be here as myself. There's no reason to be here as anybody else. And the parts of myself that have been central to my art and to my writing are my identity as a lesbian and as a Jewish lesbian. And for many, many, many years, as a very large, a fat woman. Right now you see me, I look smaller, but I was about twice my size for a long time, 30 years and more. The one thing in eliminating visuals, because to not make the presentation too long, I also eliminated the photographs, my early photographs. So I just have to tell you that. You have to imagine it. Okay, here's the parody of, and it is called the Lesbian Supremacist Song. I am the very model of a lesbian supremacist. I understand the differences between radical and feminist. About the masculine menace, I am teeming with a lot of news, with many cheerful plans to make those nasty babe boys pay their dues. I'm very good at giving space, where space is what I need myself. I never trash monogamy, except when I am on the shelf. Wherever witches gather, I am always there with book and bell. Book and bell, book and bell. I know the proper chance to send the patriarchy off to hell. I'm not going to do all the chorus parts. I'm going to leave out quite a bit of it, but don't want to give you a taste. I never smoke tobacco, nor does alcohol besmirch my lips. I never eat dead animals, except for lard in taco chips. I'm never sexist, ageist, classist, racist, or imperialist. I'll argue dialectics with the Marxist of materialists. I'm getting so evolved, my friends all ask me how I got so pure. Of all the dites I know, I am the rightest on, and that's for sure. In short and matter separatist, radical and feminist, I am the very model of a lesbian supremacist. Okay, that's taste number one. I've been in many, many writing groups. I've been in writing groups that turned into performing groups. And I've been in performing groups that but were ways of communicating about feminism, about size, oppression, about identity as a Jewish person and a Jewish woman. But in these writing groups, and I do recommend groups, just like I recommend classes, but I'll say more about that later. Quite often we start with what's called a prompt, just an idea, title, or a few words. And here's a prompt. The prompt is the egg. The egg is mother to the chick. Or is it otherwise? The trick is hen or rooster, egg they start. Nursery of feather, bones, and heart. Too elliptical to roll, more a process than a goal. Eggs express a hope for future, far more healing than a suture. Fried, they look us in the eye. Boiled, they're hard enough to die, colors natural and arty. Deviled, they define a party. Used by audiences to measure how intense is their displeasure. Rotten eggs are best for this. Eggs souffled, eggs spanned in bliss. White or bluish, Easter, Jewish. It's eggs that lift the matzah ball, or is it eggs that make them fall? Okay, I talked about size acceptance and fat liberation, which was a...
Jude?
Yes?
I'm sorry. I'm just getting a little nervous about the time. Can you go right to girls?
I will. I'm going to skip that one. It was about elephants.
Okay.
Thank you. I have given over all control, uncharacteristically for me, but I'm going to be leaning on my brother, and I'm happy to do so. All right. I had a partner for 18 years, Jessica Barchet, who grew up in the Bay Area. And at a certain point, Jess became very ill with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is like having a flu all the time, and environmental illness. So here's a poem about that and about us. There once was a girl, and a big girl too, who lived with her girl, who was always blue. And the first girl knew she could never come first, 'cause the second girl's condition went from bad to worst. So the first girl shrugged, and she squared her jaw, and she kept up her spirits, and she always saw that the second girl's heart had a soft pink pillow. And she tried not to break, but to bend like a willow. For the second girl suffered from an awful flu, or an ague, or a plague, and there wasn't a clue to exactly what it was that the second girl had. And the doctors didn't know, but it sure was bad. So the first girl tried to reduce her mopes for a life for two, full of wants and hopes. And the second girl tried to increase her strength, taking pills, taking naps of enormous length. And the two girls loved through the pain and loss, and they learned to separate the gold from the dross, for the pleasures of the play of their nimble wits changed their gloomy thoughts into laughing fits. And the second girl's spirits bubbled up anew, and the first girl figured they had both got through.
That's great, Jess. Thank you, Jess. Jessica, sorry. Jess was on my
The other
mind.
one, yes.
Yeah. All right, so thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No,
I
you're right.
just-
That was fine. I
Yeah.
wanted to do something that wasn't rhyme, but it doesn't matter. I love rhyme.
So I think if we can, I'd like to direct you into talking about your art now. I think I know I don't want to be on the screen that much, holding center screen, and I think it would be great to show some of your work at this point. So why don't we get started with that? Now let's talk about this going in, okay?
Okay. I picked this. This is an old picture that I made as a greeting card. When I was a kid, I was the go-to person for greeting cards, and that's somewhat how I started drawing. And I worked in black and white because it was cheap and it wasn't too messy. We weren't supposed to mess up because my parents had moved from an apartment into a house, and we didn't put anything on the walls. We just didn't mess up, and there were rugs. So I put this in because it shows one of my relationships with my little brother. And let's go to the next slide. This is probably one of the earliest birthday cards that I made. I was just starting to use pen. My father had pens because his father had been a sign painter, and one of his brothers had been an artist. He had these little, what's called crow quill pens, very, very tiny little nibs, and you want to fit them into the shaft and dip them in India ink. And I practiced drawing, and for color, I used colored inks. If you'll notice the Gothic handwriting, I also had a book, a speedball book of calligraphy, and I enjoyed the pen. I enjoyed the black on the paper and making the words with it. Next.
And wait, just before you move on from this,
Yeah.
didn't you? I think you once told me that you use magic marker sometimes for the color, right?
Not on this. I then don't even know if there was magic marker yet. This was probably from 1954 or 5 or something. But I, at a certain point in high school, started making posters and flyers for people to advertise things, and I used magic marker for that. And in those instances, I did use very simple color with magic marker.
Right. Okay. So then, could we have the next slide, please, Jess?
I put these here. They're way out of order, but I wanted to say that in black and white, eventually, my interest was how to create a shape using the fewest lines. And I'll mention one of my drawing teachers. I'm a self-taught artist. I learned by looking at other people's things. Was Al Hirschfeld. He did cartoons of theater people in the New York Times, Sunday Times, and I was really enjoying his work. And um, these are two dykes, Bo and Frankie. I always name everything afterwards, but I enjoy the fact that there's so little that gives so much.
You once gave me a drawing which we don't have here, unfortunately. I wasn't able to get it to you in time, but it's quite large, and it's a pen and ink drawing, and it's with very few lines. It's this just ethereal um, picture of a woman. And when I took it to get framed, um, the person who was doing the framing said, "Oh, it's amazing what he could do with such simple lines." I said, "Who do you think this is?" He says, "Well, it's Matisse, right?" And I said, "No, it's my sister." So I know Matisse was someone who was influencing you, and also, as you said, Hirschfeld and Thurber as well, I think, right?
Yes, actually, I'll come to that because I have, or let's go to the next slide.
Okay, okay.
Oh, all right, this isn't the slide I expected, but it's coming. This is a poster from the time that I started to, oh, you know what? We skipped the whole coming to San
Yeah,
Francisco part.
right. You got excited there. So
I got
we're gonna
excited.
take this. We're
I
gonna take
knew
this
I
down.
should have,
Thank you. That's all
I knew
right.
I should have those pictures of the
That's all
slide
right.
somewhere.
Jude,
Okay,
just trust me. Okay, here we go.
I believe.
S-
All right.
So so that's when you were younger, and then you went to school, right? You went to Bryn Mawr, and did you do art there?
Yes, I
What
did.
happened?
I did art there. I did illustrations and I did cartoons for the college news, and I sort of saw myself as a cartoonist. My first business card, in fact, said artist, poet, cartoonist, clown, but that came later. So I did cartoony things, and then I didn't make art for a really, really long time.
Right, and I think also you once said something to me about how initially your art was about doing service to others, and and also, and not revealing too much of yourself in your art. And then what changed that? Because it changes as you go along, right?
Yes, I'm so glad that you're paying attention to things because everything's going right out of my head. I wanted to say that even when I started writing, I didn't want to share too much of myself. I stayed on the surface very much at the beginning of writing and also at the beginning of art. I did art in service as a cultural worker, a change agent, to help someone else achieve a goal or to help a community achieve a goal. It took me a long time to be willing to show myself, and really it took coming out. It really when I came out, it took me a long time to come out. I came out at about age 33 or so, 32, 33. I came out in the San Francisco Bay Area, and everything opened up for me. And I don't say this, I mean, anyone go ahead and come out if you think it'll help you, but I'm saying part of the job of an artist is to get and have access to that inner self and be able to bring it forward into the world in service of beauty and also in service of, in many cases, of repairing the world, as we say in Hebrew, tikkun olam. Okay, and I want to say also that art takes time. It takes time to write things. It takes time to make art, depending on the kind of art. And not everybody has time. And I didn't have time for many years, or I didn't have the opportunity, or I didn't have the money to get time, or didn't have internal permission to do it. Didn't start out as an artist. I started out as an academic, loving school. I was one of those kids that loved school, and I thought I would be a doctor. If I hadn't hit up against chemistry, which I really didn't like, I might be a doctor today, but I'm glad that I was saved from that because I think it would have been a really hard job. And also, it's eventually I made my way out into making art and doing becoming a change agent with my cultural work.
And Jude, what just very briefly, can you say what it was that um, when you got to San Francisco, what was it that you kind of hooked into in the city and the zeitgeist, and then also, what brought you to this understanding about who you really were?
Well, I
know I said
I was
briefly, but
in a
that's a hard.
nutshell. In a nutshell, I would say I finally started. I went to a performance by Mother Tongue Readers Theater, and I realized that it was the kind of performing that I could do because I didn't have to memorize, but I could read expressively, which I like to do. And I started meeting and hanging out with lesbians, and I thought, oh my God, these women are just like me. They're not afraid of me. They're powerful. They're self-actualized. They're writing. They're performing, and there's a space for me here. And uh, that part of me, which I had kept very under wraps and under control, just burst out, and I came to a different relationship with the universe. I saw the universe as benevolent. I saw it as female, and I saw it as benevolent, and I saw there being a place for me, and in a way, a job for me to live this reality. I became myself, and from
And
and having become myself, I could then become all that I could be.
right, so perfectly. Now let's go back to the little preview that we had, the slide there,
There you
and we'll get now that we're back on track. Okay,
go. All righty.
here
All
we
right.
go.
This is the Moonrise Cafe up in Santa Rosa uh, was run and owned by women, and it was a collective. And they gave me a space for my first show. I had been in a few group shows down at the Women's Building in San Francisco and some other little galleries around town, but this was my first solo show. And a through line in my art is that at least my art at that time, was very centered in the body. I wasn't using models. It was just coming from my head. And as you'll see, I'm going to show you some of my note cards. But I, again, I'm interested in how few lines it takes, and also the way that line creates a feeling of volume. Black and white is a beautiful medium to create a feeling of volume. Okay, we can go to
So
the.
Jude, let's go to the next slide and talk about how this. Back one, please. You jumped ahead.
Oh, no, you're thinking of the.
Oh, no, you were right. My bad. Thank you. No, go to the next one. My
Right.
bad, Jessica.
I want to look at this is an example of art that I did for a purpose. I did it to advertise the Jewish Feminist Conference, and but I had an interest in showing varied members of our community, and including age and ethnicity and physical ability and disability. And I show you this because sometimes the note cards, which I'm going to talk about, came from the posters that I made. All right.
Okay, and so now please go ahead,
Oh,
because
yeah.
this is the one I was expecting,
Right.
because I remember this image was really transformative for you.
It was. At a certain point, I got those things that we saw before now are out of order. At a certain point, I got a big, um, what are they called? Sketch pad. And I just started drawing with a pen, a simple pen. And some large women came out on this page. It was just when I was just really right when I was coming out. And the sense of freedom and the sense of expansion that I felt is expressed here. And a friend of mine saw this and said, "Oh, black and white." She was working at the Women's Press Project. Martha Wall is her name, and she said, "You could put these on note cards very easily." And I said, "Oh, that's great! A little piece of art that somebody can afford to buy, that they can send away or that they can keep. Perfect for me.
And let's go to the next slide, please.
Yes. So the first slide and this slide are examples of drawing from the shape, from the line. This particular image, which is one, and we're going to see some of the note cards now, big woman note cards. This is the little person in the basket is very frightened and very afraid. It's a spiritual card for me because really, as in this conversation, she's in good hands. She's going to be taken care of. And this was the type of image that I wanted to put out.
Okay, and the next.
Here is one of the note cards that I made for a reason. It's a Hanukkah card, and I wanted to show, it's back in my sort of cartoony style. I wanted to show somebody preparing latkes for the holiday. And in fact, the name of it is There's More Than One Way to Nourish a Tradition. Neither of us, we didn't really grow up as observant Jews. We were Jewish. We went to temple on holidays, and we knew we were Jewish, and it formed us. But I had a hard time with some of the aspects of sort of the religion part of Jewish identity. And it was when I came out that I was able to see that I could have the parts that I wanted and not the parts that I didn't want. And so I wanted to celebrate that.
We talked also about, I remember, Jude, you're talking about how the paternalism that's kind of woven all through Judaism and the whole Judeo-Christian tradition was very off-putting. And this, you said to me once that this was a way of seizing back Judaism and not making it paternalistic. And
That's right.
and I think, yeah.
That was my point, exactly.
Right. And could we have the next slide, please?
Here is a card that I made as a non-monogamous anniversary card. There's a lot of talk about that, and there's talk about that now, of open relationships. But when I finally published it, I just put it out under Happy Dash, and I've used it for many birthdays and other occasions. It has a lot of lesbian iconography. It's got the Labradors, it has the boots, the Fry boots, the Birkenstocks, and you can't see it, but the table is the closet door. They're out of the closet. And so it was, yes, okay, we can see the next one.
Yeah, and this, yeah.
This card, it was actually, I made it as a t-shirt design for my group, Fat Lip Readers Theater, which is the name of my group that talked about and performed and wrote and performed about the necessity to love ourselves at any size and to push back against fat oppression, which is so controlling and so toxic to girls especially, and to everyone. And I made it into a card as well. Yeah.
I was just going to go, because from that I wanted to go to the next slide, because this, I really love this. It's such an exuberant celebration and really talks about, I think anyway, how you told me you were feeling inside during this time.
Yes, it does. I think many of my cards are really joyful and loving. I mean, all my cards are joyful and loving, let's put it that way. And some of them are a lot of fun. This was also from a flyer that I made for the San Francisco Lesbian Chorus, that I made into a flyer and a button and eventually a note card. And I loved sending this card to people. And
then finally, I just want to, I'm sorry, Jude, you paused. I didn't realize you weren't finished. Were you finished?
I just want to say that if you want to see my note cards, you can go to my website, Judith Masur, Fine Arts with an S.com. And I'll repeat that at the end. And there's a line of 26 cards. I'm just showing a few of them here.
Okay, and the next, please. And this one just always knocks me out because it feels like such, you're in a in a transition. It looks like a woodcut, but it's not, and or a linoleum cut, and it's not. So could you
Yes,
explain this?
it's a large pen and ink. It's about, it's very large, and I liked it. It's actually me and my first lover, Sarah, is probably on the call, and it's interesting what comes through because the top figure is kind of pushing away and the other figure is drawing towards, and that's kind of how our relationship went. But I loved it so much that I made it into a silk screen, and instead of black and white I made it a deep blue, kind of midnight, not a black, blue black. It's very lovely. I have many of them in case you're interested. And then eventually I made it into a note card, and I have it up right now in my bedroom, so it's an image I like a lot.
So I think Jessica, we can stop sharing the screen for a little bit now. You said that you mentioned earlier that that you were doing things in service to something you wanted to talk about, something you wanted to support, groups of people, and then you moved in and started focusing on the note cards and things, and that had to do with trying to make a living through your art, right?
It did, and I don't know if any artists are out there, but it's really hard to make a living through your art. I'm not sorry I did the note cards. They were distributed nationally and internationally, and they were some of the very first lesbian note cards out there. I first put them out in 1978. Um, I Making a living has been a challenge for me, and I think you said one of the kindest things you ever said to me, because I've had a checkered career. One of the kindest things you ever said to me, because I thought of myself as basically a bum, somebody that couldn't pull it together, to stay with something or to have a career. And you said, "Well, I think you get bored." I That meant so much to me when you said that. I am curious about a lot of things, and I have done a lot of things in my life. Arlene mentioned the body work. I spent many years as a Traeger practitioner and tutor, and I also worked as a teacher for many years. I'm trying to turn off the teaching part in this conversation. It's very hard to turn. Teachers can't really turn it off. I But as I started to say before, to make art, you need time, opportunity, money, permission, motivation, and luck. And so for many years, I was trying to, as you say, make a living. I tried to make a living with my art. In desperation, I learned to become a computer programmer, which is just wild.
Well, I just want to point out though, when that happened and you went in that direction and you actually found it something that you could do, I'm not going to say easily, but I think it was, relatively speaking, easily. And because you were always not only attracted to, but you were incredibly facile with language and still are. I mean, you speak a whole range of languages, which you're not entirely, but almost entirely self-taught, right?
Well, I went to school for Latin. I went to
Mhm.
school for Greek, French, Spanish. No, I learned that speaking, and of course we heard Yiddish at home. Although, and this is a heartbreak for me, we never really was never really spoken. I studied Hebrew, but that didn't take. I studied Russian, and then I had the chance to go and live in Italy. And when I went to Italy, I said, I'm going to learn this on my own. I'm not going to go to a class. Because when I had learned French and I tried to speak it, I found that I was hard to pull it out. I didn't realize how much it takes of practice before you can be good at a language. But in Italy, I decided I'm not going to speak English with anyone. I'm not going to read English. I'm going to just take it in. And I had a little book, a little
Berlitz or something.
A Cassell's dictionary, and they're about this size. Had a little bit of grammar in the front, and of course, I had a background in these Romance languages that helped me. But I did learn it, and I became fluent in it, and I loved it. It's it's of a piece with the story of my writing and my art because it involves pleasure, curiosity, communication, and what it takes is a willingness to be a beginner. And I'll just say this to my audience now. At our age, and many of us are older, I'm 76, and at our age, it can feel very uncomfortable to be a beginner because we are so very competent in so many ways. But sometimes it's helpful to allow ourselves to be beginners so that we can step into something that we're not already good at. It took me a long time to realize that it takes time to learn something. When I was a kid, if either I could do it or I couldn't do it. If I couldn't do it, it wasn't for me. And that happened for me in color, about color. In eighth grade, we had a teacher. She would come sometimes. I don't know. It wasn't obvious when she was going to show up, an art teacher. And one day she brought watercolors. And so I decided to try to paint a picture of a Japanese woman in a kimono. I don't know what thought made me think I could do it. Of course, I did do it, but I was frustrated. And watercolor is very hard to control, especially if you know nothing about it. If I looked at it now, looking back, it was probably really good. But I said, okay, I can't do this. Color's not for me. I don't understand it. I can't fix it. And I'm going to let it go. And I let it go for a good solid 25 years. I didn't deal with color at all.
And I think because that's going to lead us into a whole other area. But before we go there, I just want to go back because you mentioned, well, you mentioned earlier about when you did the song about you and Jess, your partner, and her illness, and she was very ill for quite a long time, and I, from a certain distance, I observed what you guys went through, and part of that was involved your having to move several times to find safer places where she could be healthier, though not really healthy, but just not as hurt by the environment as she was. And forgive me for those of you who are in the Bay Area, So you ended up in Prescott, Arizona, because that was thought to be a safe place. And you made this very daring move down there, the two of you. And then what happened when you got there?
Well, we had to get, it was either break up or move, and I decided to move. And because the restrictions were very severe of this illness, and we were becoming increasingly isolated as we were making new friends in the disabled community. In the disabled community, we were losing other friends who weren't willing to go through what it took to come into our house in terms of making themselves safe. So we moved to Prescott, Arizona, because I got a job in a small college, Prescott College, and we moved there because there was no industry and no agriculture. So there were fewer pesticides and no industry, and that's a problem in the Bay Area. But it was very isolating. In fact, the best egg roll in town was at Jack in the Box. That says it all. Anyway, the good part was that I got to work at this college, and I got to experience the Southwest, which is extremely transformative to me. So at the college, I got to take a class, and I took a watercolor class to try to heal myself, and for another reason also. One of the last things I did before we moved out of San Francisco, Berkeley, was I made a children's book. I'd been working on it since the 70s, but I made a children's book called Dragon of the Day, and all the illustrations, which are delightful, by the way, they were all in black and white. And people said, what about color? And I said, I don't know anything about color. I don't know how to control it. I don't know how to do it. And so when I had a chance, I took a watercolor class to try to step back into an uncomfortable place to try to see and be a beginner try to see where I would do, what I would do.
Oh,
And
okay, Jessica, can you put up the first, the next slide rather?
yes, well, this is, I guess I did this in the watercolor class, and what you pointed out, this is yours, obviously, I mean, of course, but this was still working with line, but in color. But in the watercolor class, I found that I somewhat could do it. Because I had been drawing in black and white, and I was able to let go and really be a beginner and remember that less is more. And all those lessons from black and white brought me to the point of being willing to step into color.
And, and part of that, I think, is, as you've expressed it to me, was once you made that, opened that door, you opened the door to maybe there are ways to do this that don't just involve the direct pen to paper or stylus to paper or brush to paper, and that took you into other things, right?
Well, the second class I took was printmaking.
Okay. Could we
And
go to the next slide, please?
yeah, this is also going forward because this is still me with line. This is a dry point, and also me with the body. This is a dry point, and with my body and my strength as a woman. And let's see the next one. And this too is a dry point. But here I was, instead of inking in black, I was inking in sepia or dark brown. And even though I made these later, I'm just showing them to you as a kind of a transitional way to talk about it. Now let's see the next slide. Okay, so in the printmaking class, we did linoleum cuts where you're carving a line into a soft piece of material, and then you're inking it. And the way prints are usually done is people do the same print many times, and that's called an edition, and then they're numbered. So, but that just drove me crazy. I didn't like having to do the same thing every time, so I started putting different colors on the linoleum cut. And my teacher said, "Oh, that's what's called a monoprint, where something is reproducible, but the color is different." And having begun there, that was fun. I stepped into color in printing. And I stepped into something called monotype, where there's nothing reproducible exactly, and where I moved from line into surface.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
In printing is about adding color and about subtracting color. Subtracting color, literally, this type of monotype is done on a piece of plastic. You make the image on the plastic, you add color with a roller. It has to be very thin because it's going to go under the press and get pressed against the paper. And if it's too thick, it'll squish, which you might want, but you usually don't want. But when you take away color, you see the color of the paper itself. It reads as white, but you see the color of the paper itself. So these combinations interested me. And the advantage to me of printing over, say, painting was that I could fool around with the color on the plate before I committed it to the paper. And then the press itself, the pressure of it, many factors, and how much ink it pulls off had an effect on the final image. Not only that, but it's a mirror image. Here's the plate, here's the paper. When you take it off, it's something you've never really seen before.
So it's a conversation between all the media and between you and the press.
Right, it's a collaboration.
Right.
And as in my writing, collaborating with other writers and performers and collaborating with the press, there's a through line there.
Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes. The advantage to me in printing was that if it didn't come out exactly the way I thought it would come out, it wasn't necessarily my fault. And I mention this because I was very you may not know this about me, but I have a controlling side. And I think all artists have that, need that, but we also need to be able, or I needed to be able to let go of it and accept the gift of an accident or something I didn't plan. So for a
Jude,
while I did trees. I know we have to move.
no. I was just going to say, when you first came upon the concept of these birch tree slash aspen trees, depending on where you live in the world, did you happen on that almost accidentally, or was it always something that you saw?
No, in a way, I did happen. I happened on all of my color work accidentally because I wasn't going outside and drawing from nature. I wasn't making sketching and coming in and trying to reproduce it. I didn't draw from nature at all at this point. I didn't know if I could. I didn't want to give myself the task and maybe fail at it. So it was a place of exploration, following curiosity, figuring out. An artist I knew there, Rhonda Willinger, said to me, just try to figure out what the tools do and what the medium does. Don't focus on the product. Focus on the process. And she said, you have to cover 500 miles of paper. And that released me. And I give it to you, my listeners, as a suggestion. And if you decide to go back and look into your creativity, don't judge yourself. Don't use other people against yourself. Don't use their success as a way to feel less. Just go in, find out what the tools can do. And if you're working in paper or whatever you're working with, just keep doing it. And after a while, you'll see something you like. And you can feel happy about that.
Jude, I want to suggest that the next 5 slides that we put up for about 10 seconds each so people can see them. And then you can just talk through, or maybe a little longer. Let's just have the next slide.
Good. I know you got to watch the time. We really want to watch the time.
Now here you managed to pull depth and shape and volume out of the color, which I think I hadn't seen before.
Yes, it's there are many tricks. There are tricks in art, and I was interested in depth, in layers. And of course, when you're making a landscape, you want to have that experience.
And the next one. Now, I had never seen you do anything even approaching abstraction. And then you started showing me and other people this kind of work. Now, what was that experience like for you?
Again, it was from seeing what the tools could do and letting myself play. I never really played as a kid with art. You could hand me a brush and I just look at it. It was too scary. But in printmaking, I was able to play and to add on and take away. And many prints are made by running the paper through and the plate through again and again, changing what's on the plate and running again. I like to do it all at once, and this, believe it or not, is a one-shot print. If we're
Right,
getting like 10 minutes, we got to go quicker.
No, it's okay.
10.
No, it's okay. You also, I want you to talk just for a second about ghosts, because even though these are monotypes, you ushered me into the concept, which is sometimes really almost more surprising and better maybe than the original. So
Yes,
please.
what a ghost is once you take the first pull, the first print, you pull the paper off, it takes a certain amount of the color with it. Sometimes what's left on the plate can also be printed, and that is called a ghost. And quite often, I didn't put a ghost in here, I wanted to, but I really had to cut very severely. I started out with 97 slides, now we have 40. But sometimes the ghost is way more engaging than the first pull. This is a first.
Yeah, it's like sometimes there's a company called Ren Spooner. It's a Hawaiian shirt manufacturer, and the guy came up with this idea many years ago because people always liked their Hawaiian shirts to be a little bit worn out and faded. So he took the fabrics and he turned them upside down, and he put the backside as the outside of the shirt. And it's a tremendously interesting technique. Anyway, nothing to do with this. Could we have the next slide?
It's okay. You get to talk too. So some of the abstracts kind of look like something else. This looks like trees, and it's called, can't even see what it's called. Life force. It's sort of the aura that living things give out. Although, as I said to you, I name things afterwards. I don't think to myself, oh, I'm going to make a picture of life force. I don't.
And the next slide, please.
Again, this is called Sacred Heart, and because this picture feels kind of sacred to me, but it was, as the other ones are, an example of just following the material, following the experience. When I did my shows of my monotypes, I called them energy, feeling, and color in motion. And again, the color is about surface. It's not about edge. Black and white is about edge, but color for me, not that there aren't edges in here, but I didn't sit down and make each edge. I made it by taking away and manipulating the color that was already on the plate.
And just very quickly, Jude, all the light areas are where you've gone through and you've removed the color
right.
that you had originally put. I just want to point that out because
Yeah.
you've made reference to it. But so this is a real example of what the removal of the ink does, how it creates shape and volume and energy, twisting motions. It's yeah.
And
Okay.
and what I love about prints is that you have the luminosity of the paper coming through. And by the way, I use water-based inks. At first I used oil-based inks, but it was too hard for Jess to be around them. And so I went to water-based inks, and better for me too. So they're
And then just one more of these, Jessica.
this is one I particularly like. It's called, I named it Nebula. I like the way it moves and the way it's so three-dimensional. But I'll tell you, art is a miracle. And I'm sorry to use that term, it's so hackneyed, but it's unbelievable what you discover when you get into just finding out what things can do.
Right. Okay. So let's. I want to just point you back. You mentioned Traeger earlier. Can you explain a little bit about what that is? That's the kind of body work that you trained in and you did for quite a while.
Well, I think all body work, and especially Traeger, is about being with the body and listening to what's happening within the body as you interact. The body being the person who's on the table, of course, but also the Traeger involves rolling, rocking, stretching, for want of a better word, sort of fluffing the body so that it remembers or reminds itself of how it could feel to move easily. And in fact, the watchword of Traeger is what could be easier. But I think that we're going to move now back into the body because I went into clay and let's go to the next. Actually, let's go to the next. I'm worried about the time.
No, we're good. We're good. We're
No?
good.
What about
Yeah.
the questions and answers?
We have plenty of time.
Okay. All right. So at a certain point, after maybe 20 years of monotypes, I decided that I would try something that I really didn't know how to do. And I went into clay. I signed up at my community college, Laney, to do a figure sculpting class.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jude. You're now in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I just want to point that out because we skipped over that part where you moved to
Oh,
Santa
okay.
Fe.
Oh,
That's okay.
yeah, skip it.
That's okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
You just can't say everything, can you? All right.
No, it's
So
all right.
over to clay. When I first started with clay, I thought, there's no way I can do this. I'm looking at something real. I'm trying to make it look like what it looks like. I don't know how to do it. But little by, I just made myself become a beginner and come to peace with that. And little by little, and clay also is about adding and subtracting. I began to notice that, okay, there's that curve right there on that body, and here's the exact same curve here. I mean, physically, it's the same curve. It's not an abstraction like drawing. In drawing, you're looking at something three-dimensional and you're drawing something two-dimensional, or also in painting. Not that I paint, but with clay, with sculpting, you're looking at 3D and you're coming into 3D. So I thought, okay, well, let's see what happens. There are also challenges in terms of how the thing stands up or this or that, but a lot of it really has to do with experiencing the body in the clay. I put this up because the model very kindly let us take pictures of himself. This was what's called a quick pose. He couldn't have held it for the amount of time that a model sits, but he let us take photos of him in this position. And on the left is the sculpture, on the right is the model, as you can see, obviously. But he then made this diptych and gave me a copy of it and said that I could show it to people. And so I'm showing it to you. This was what I tried to do, and I kind of learned how to do it.
Great. Let's go to the next. And Jude, again, what you're doing when you're doing the Traeger is you're in I say conversation, you say collaboration with the body, and what you're doing here is you're in collaboration with not just the because that last piece, I don't think that picture was not a piece that was fired.
No.
It was just sculpted. So then you start into a conversation or a collaboration with the body, with the clay, and then with color and with fire.
Yes.
So you're just broadening the amounts of possible entities that can screw each other up here.
Yeah, screw each other up, or if you're very lucky, enhance each other. And
Exactly.
there's been a lot of luck in it. This is one of my, back to the body, because my goals was to show women, especially, but I also sculpted men, but to show women as they are, as we are in our age. Here's an older woman, not as old as me, but you see that her body has progressed during her time on the planet. And I put her into what's called a raku fire, which is a very exciting process that involves a lot of risk. It involves taking something red hot out of the oven and putting it into something that's going to burn, like newspaper, and then covering it and smoking it, basically. And the crackling here is the characteristic result. And wherever you see a dark color, really dark color, it's the smoke from the raku process. So let's see the next slide, though. Here I'm going to show just a couple of slides of other sculptures. Again, I was very excited that we got a fat model in the class. Sometimes you see these sort of parenthetical, very slim bodies, and while they are quick and easy to draw and lovely to sculpt, I love the way a large body really takes up space and enjoys itself. Let's have the next one. Here is I'm still I'm working a little bit now with color. It was always very challenging to me to color my sculptures, and that's one reason I used the raku fire, because it provided its own color. Uh, and but Here I've used a little bit of what's called underglaze to color the sculpture. Let's do the next one. Here, this is the same model as the other one, but a couple of years separate, and it's a little bit more realistic, less abstracted. But again, it's how I felt and how I know many feel. A person at home with herself, with her body enjoying its own volume and having its proper place. Next slide.
And then this one.
Oh, and this is self-portrait, which I did, which is, it kind of looks like me in a way. I did it using a mirror and what's called calipers, where you take the size of what you're looking at and you stick it against the clay to see that the size is the same. So this is a life-size portrait. Okay, next one. This is more about the raku fire. I was making, in addition to doing the sculptures of figures, I was making bas reliefs where I was using
Wait, don't get ahead of yourself.
All
Don't
right.
get ahead of yourself.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is an example of what the raku fire can do. This was completely white originally, but the fire reacts to the surfaces and gives its own gift to the image. And
the thing I love is what happened to the eyes and the teeth through this process. They just all of a sudden come alive. It's crazy in this matrix of cracks and smudges, and then there's this intelligence looking out at you. I love this one.
thank you.
Not that I don't love the others, but this one always has
All right,
struck me.
you can have
Okay,
both.
now you can go to what you were talking about. Sorry to.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. I decided to take what's called a slab, a flat piece of clay, and draw a picture on it and then push out from behind to make it three-dimensional and then smooth it off so that it would be three-dimensional. And in this case, I did put underglazes before I put the white crackle on top. So I put this into the raku fire, and the fire master said to me, "Oh, this is one of the favorite things that I've seen of yours," because he had been doing some of the statues. He said, "Have you ever thought of putting it on a vase, on a pot?" I said, "Well, I cannot make such a pot because it was a large pot, and I didn't stay on the wheel very long before I decided I would go back to sculpting." I said, "I can't make that pot." He said, "I'll make the pot and you do the sculpting." So we began a collaboration there.
Okay, and now we'll go right to the next slide then.
Right, now we're going to show some of the pots. So it is always been my interest to show connection and interaction among my figures, and to show particularly women caring for each other, being there for each other, and enjoying life together. So on these pots, there's usually more than one figure. You can see that these were not made from life, these images. Next one.
Now I just want to point out that only a few of these
Sure.
was
Yes.
Judith able to shoot videos on a turntable. So some of them you only get one aspect of.
Right, and it's a challenge in applying to shows and things. It's being able to show the whole object. So this is also an image on a pot, and then you can
And
see
so,
the effect of the raku on it. The black part is just the fire itself, and the white is the effect of the smoking.
and Judith, now you're collaborating with the clay, with the body, and with the
And with the
fire,
fire,
and with the fabricator who's making the pots for you.
right.
Right. Okay. And you're pushing these all out from behind, right?
I'm pushing them from the inside, and I left those.
Yeah.
If you put your hand inside, you can feel where it was pushed out, and then I'm, making the edges the way I want them.
Right. Next slide, please.
This is not raku. This is what's called high fire. It's in the kiln. Most of the pottery that we eat off of is high fire. It's very hard and impermeable. But this is the green is called matte turquoise, and the speckles come from the clay body itself. It's iron that comes through in the fire, in the heat of the fire. And where it's brown, I've wiped away the green glaze so that the color of the clay comes through.
I just want to mention, if people would like to ask a question, if you can put it in the chat, we're going to get to questions very shortly. Okay, next slide, please.
This is one of the very, very few that I colored completely. And I've been swimming now for quite a while, and I wanted to show the pleasure of that.
And the first time I saw this, I was surprised that they kept being more and more figures. I mean, it just, until it turned, you just had no idea there were 3 figures there. Okay, next slide, please.
I wish I had this one in the round. This is called picking pears, and really the way the raku fire affected it is very exciting. It doesn't show completely in this still. It's sort of metallic in a way. It shimmers.
Okay, and the next slide, please.
This is again the technique of taking away the color, which I did by masking, and then dipping. Here they're holding hands. When you saw these, you said, "Oh, these are political." Well, yeah, and I kind of bridled at that, and I said, "Well, in a way, they are political. They're about how we love each other, and we help each other, and we're there for each other."
I do not remember saying that. That's
Yes.
very interesting. Okay.
It was astute. It was astute. Again, I wish I had this in the round. This is also that same technique, a high fire technique. And
Okay.
as the mother of these, I must say that it's exciting to see them. I like them.
Okay. So
You want to start with questions?
yeah, but I want to put one more slide up, please. I think this is
Oh, this is the last
oh
slide.
yeah.
But one.
And yeah, I want to start with the questions. I neglected to say, if you post a question, please do me a favor and put a Q at the beginning so I know it's a question. Just looking. Here's one. Are these note cards, the scenery, trees, animals, etc., available to purchase? I could not find them on Judith's website. We'll get to that at the end. Okay. Then some lovely compliments, which you'll get to read later. Okay. What do you see as the next chapter in your artistic journey?
Well, like everybody else, I've been shut down by COVID. I can't go to the studio. For a while, the colleges were closed, and then I'm still reluctant to go and be in a place, even a really big place with other people. And I can't do it at home, and I can't really use clay at home. It's too messy and toxic. But so I've been doing art. I've been doing figure drawing and taking classes at the Berkeley Adult School, open to everyone.
And I just wanted to underscore that, because as much as you are self-taught, and I can absolutely verify that you are self-taught, what I've noticed is that what you do is you collect the tools that are available by going to class, by seeking them out. And then you go off on your own and you say, what can I do with these tools? How can I do it differently? And then you'll, every once in a while, you go and check back and say, is this the right way to be doing this? So there's this kind of ongoing process of educating and re-educating and extending your education. And I assume you would recommend that to anybody who's thinking about doing this kind of thing.
Absolutely. Groups for writing, groups and classes. And the reason I recommend them is that you get help, you get support, you're not alone, and you get inspiration from other people. Don't use other people to judge yourself, use them for inspiration. And also, it gives you a place to go and do it. I'm not a self-starter. I like to work to an assignment or to show up when it's and have everything that I need that's there, or bring it with me. Um, the yeah.
Okay, so here's another question. Have you ever explored adding words slash narrative with your visual art? Not as an explanation, but as another layer. In other words, I assume kind of mixed media. Is that
Yes,
something
I have
that?
thought about. I've thought about it. I mean, I've done it in posters. I've done it, for a purpose, and I did it in the book. But I haven't. I've held back from it.
Right. I also here, I just have to read this. This is from a dear friend who you've known for many, many years. I'm not going to name her, but she says, you two both did a fabulous job. I even learned some things I didn't know. It was from Felice, by the way. So anyway, I'm looking for more questions. I'm still scanning the list, but I'll just throw one in, which is, because we talked a lot about, or a little bit, I should say, not enough, about what it is to make a living through one's art. And my goal when I set out to do what I was doing, which I kind of fell into, was to see if I could. I literally said this to the first agent I ever had. When she asked what I wanted to do, I said, I'd like to be able to make a living without having to do anything else to make the living. And she said that seems like it could be an achievable goal, but one never knows. And so,
Sounds like a great goal.
right.
I've never achieved it. You did,
Yeah.
and I
No,
admire you
but
for that.
but it's a goal that many people um, either expect is easily achieved or can't possibly be achieved, and the truth lies completely in between. It's just, look, there is so much of your work, Judith, that is so extraordinary, and so I mean, I have a bunch of it here. I'm lucky that I do, but the fact that it's been so difficult for you to be able to monetize your work, and I know that's true for many artists. It's just astonishing to me, because it's
Well,
beautiful
wait,
to
wait. Let
look
me.
at.
I'm going to interrupt you now. Okay.
Yes.
I want to say something about that. At the beginning, I said you need time, opportunity, money, permission, motivation, and luck. And you also, in order to make money from art, you need drive, you need ambition. And that's something that I haven't had enough of. And also, um, and even that question of can you buy these things? I have a website. It's it's not all that it should be, because you can go on it, you can look at things, it doesn't have everything on it, you can see a lot of things, but you can't know what anything costs or what the size of anything is, because I haven't been able to get myself to do that. It is that part of me that was present at the beginning about don't don't show everything about yourself. That part plays out also in well, I think for every artist, there's a time where you have to decide, am I going to let this stuff go? And I have sold many things. I've sold, especially monotypes, I've sold them, and I've sold black and white. I haven't sold any of the pots yet, the vessels. And it's very hard to know what price to put on, and it's hard. It's basically a question of what would it take for me to give this to you? It isn't time and materials because it's taken all this time to make that piece. But so it's a challenge, and I think it's a challenge, big challenge for artists. That part, that enterprising part, we might have it in service of others. It's hard to have it in service of ourselves. And I'm caught there. About being self-taught, definitely I've gotten tremendous amount of information in classes, and I've learned from teachers, and I've learned from other students. But I didn't go to art school. I never thought I would be an artist for a living, and I haven't. And I've just about been an artist for a living. So I have to still deal with this part of it, and it's good that you brought it up because it's held me back. And also in
Well,
publishing.
let me just put this out there. If there's anybody on this webinar who has some assistance to lend to you,
Want to
please
represent
feel
me,
free to. Please feel free. Well, that or just help you build out the website so you can sell some stuff. But anyway, please feel free to post that right in the chat. Anyway, I just wanted there now. All of a sudden, there are a whole bunch of questions after we got into that. This is? Let me see. Where do you get your inspiration to do nudes? Keep it short.
from myself, and also from an experience I had when I was first coming out at the Michigan Women's Music Festival, where there are a lot of women, thousands of women walking around, many of them with no clothes on, and I said to myself, "Wow, I am on the continuum. I'm not that weird person that isn't this way and isn't that way. I'm part of bodies as they actually exist." And it's been my goal to continue to offer that to the world.
So here's a good follow-up to that. How has your own aging and your own new body and body image from your weight change influenced and how is it showing up in your work, or how do you think it will show up in your work?
Oh, that is a very challenging question. I don't know. I sometimes wonder because I still want to make images of big women and big women, but I also will leave space for other images as well.
Okay, and do you ever, this will be the last one, I think, because we're getting very near the end. Do you ever get artistically blocked? If so, what strategies do you use to get out of an artistic slump?
Just everything I said. Classes, classes. Having a
Yeah,
place to go where I can do it, and or working in service of something else.
right. I and for me, coming at this from a different angle, from at a different set of artistic tools and experiences, for me, because I have no control over whether or not I get to work or do anything like that. So I've had to broaden what I define as my work to include a service for others, to include political work, to include just a whole range of things that I know will keep my mind and my juices flowing, so that I don't just get stale and dried up. Anyway, I want to toss it back to Arlene now, who I think is going to, with your permission, Judith, if you want to say a few words to end up, go ahead. Jude, do you want to say anything before Arlene comes in?
Well, I want to thank Arlene for being my wrangler, number one, and I want to thank Charis Hanshaw and Jessica Sterling for publicizing and running this show. Thank you.
Well, and I want to thank you both. You are quite a pair. You got to go on the road with this. It's really terrific how you interact and share. And Judith, your story is so inspiring. It's just very, very touching. And I have a brilliant idea I want to share with you for a possible career, your next step. How about you become an art teacher? You are so good at this. And I'm sure through Ashby Village. What does that mean? No?
Save me from that.
Oh, say,
She's-
oh, but no, a
I don't want
workshop.
to be a teacher anymore.
No, I mean, a
I want to
workshop.
sit under a tree, a big tree, and have people come to me for advice.
Okay. But you are.
But thank you. No, it's a compliment that you said that, and
You are
I
so
do receive
wise.
that. I received that.
Yeah,
Thank
you are so wise and so encouraging, for
Yes.
people who are feeling scared about trying, what all the things that you have to say about being a beginner and giving yourself permission and all the risks that you took. I mean, you are quite a role model.
Thank
So
you.
I want to thank you, and thank you, Richard. You just, both of you just facilitate, AA1. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. So with that, I think I'll say goodbye, merci, and shalom.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Arlene.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Arlene.
everybody,
Thank you very
for
much.
joining
And
us
thank you,
today.
Jessica.
Yes, Jessica, thank you.
Bye.